Heavenly Stories.
The city exhaled a gritty haze as dusk settled over its jagged skyline. Streetlights flickered on, casting long shadows across cracked sidewalks and graffiti-tagged walls. Downtown was a pulse of contradictions. Glass towers gleamed with corporate wealth, while alleys reeked of neglect, littered with discarded coffee cups and broken dreams. In this urban sprawl, Marcus Tate was just another thread in the city's fraying fabric, a delivery driver weaving through traffic to drop off packages for people he'd never meet. At 28, he was lean and tired, his eyes sharp from scanning street signs, his hands calloused from gripping handlebars. Tonight, his shift was almost over, just one more delivery before he could crash at his cramped apartment. Marcus pedaled his bike down 14th Street, the weight of a backpack stuffed with takeout orders pulling at his shoulders. The city's rhythm was relentless, horns blared, pedestrians jostled, and neon signs buzzed with promises of cheap eats and cheaper thrills. He didn't notice the three figures lurking in the alley off Carver Boulevard, their hoods up, eyes glinting with intent. Marcus was thinking about the rent due tomorrow, the overdue phone bill, the way his mom's voice sounded thinner on their last call. He didn't see the ambush coming. The alley was a narrow choke point, barely lit, sandwiched between a shuttered pawn shop and a vape store with iron bars on its windows. As Marcus slowed to check his phone's GPS, they struck. It was fast, too fast. A fist caught his jaw, another his ribs. His bike clattered to the ground, wheels spinning uselessly. Wallet. Phone. Now, one of them growled, a knife flashing in the dim light. Marcus fumbled, heart pounding, but his defiance cost him. A boot to his stomach doubled him over, and the last thing he saw was the glint of steel before a blow sent him sprawling. They took everything, phone, wallet, backpack, and vanished into the city's veins, leaving Marcus crumpled on the asphalt, blood pooling beneath him. The parable of the Good Samaritan, told by a wandering teacher 2,000 years ago, began to unfold again in this forgotten corner of the city. A man lay broken, in need of help, his fate hinging on who might pass by. The question hung in the air, as old as the story itself: who is our neighbor today? In a city of millions, where everyone was a stranger, who would stop for Marcus? The first to approach was a man in a tailored suit, his polished shoes clicking against the pavement. Daniel Harper was a city councilman, a rising star with a campaign smile and a knack for soundbites. He was late for a fundraiser at a downtown hotel, where donors waited to hear his promises of a safer, cleaner city. His phone buzzed with texts from his assistant, urging him to hurry. As he cut through Carver Boulevard, his eyes caught Marcus's slumped form. A flicker of concern crossed his face, but it was quickly smothered. Not my problem, he thought. The guy could be drunk, high, or worse, part of some scam. Daniel had seen the news, good intentions got people hurt. Besides, he had a speech to give, votes to win. He adjusted his tie, stepped over a crushed soda can, and kept walking, his silhouette fading into the neon glow. Marcus groaned, his fingers twitching against the cold ground. Pain throbbed in his chest, each breath a jagged effort. The city moved on around him, indifferent, its pulse unbroken. A few cars rolled by, their headlights sweeping over the alley but not lingering. A couple of teenagers passed, laughing, their earbuds drowning out Marcus's faint call for help. The world kept spinning, and Marcus was just a speck in its orbit. Then came the sound of footsteps, lighter, hesitant. Sarah Coleman, a young pastor, emerged from the subway station, her tote bag slung over her shoulder. She'd spent the day at a church conference, her notebook filled with ideas for her next sermon on loving thy neighbor. Her cross necklace caught the streetlight as she glanced down the alley. Marcus's crumpled form stopped her cold. Her heart raced, a mix of pity and fear. She'd preached about compassion, but this was real, raw, messy, dangerous. The alley was dark, and the city's dangers were never far. What if he's bait? She thought. What if someone's waiting? She clutched her bag tighter, whispering a prayer for the man's safety. She told herself she'd call for help when she got to her car. Her steps quickened, carrying her past the alley, her conscience heavy but her fear heavier. Marcus's world narrowed to the pain, the cold, and the faint hope that someone, anyone, would stop. The city, with all its noise and light, seemed to turn its back. Who, in this urban wilderness, would prove to be his neighbor? The city's heartbeat thumped on, oblivious to the man bleeding out in its shadows. Marcus Tate lay sprawled in the alley off Carver Boulevard, his breath a ragged whisper against the damp asphalt. His delivery bike, now a twisted heap, glinted faintly under a flickering streetlight. Blood matted his hair, and his torn jacket did little to fend off the evening chill. The three muggers who'd left him here were long gone, their footsteps swallowed by the urban drone of traffic and distant laughter. Marcus's fingers twitched, grasping at nothing, as pain anchored him to the cold ground. The ancient question, who is my neighbor? Hung heavy in the air, unanswered as the city rushed past. The alley was a no-man's land, a place where the city's polish gave way to its underbelly. Graffiti scrawled across the walls preached rebellion, while overflowing dumpsters preached neglect. Marcus's faint groans blended with the hum of neon signs from the vape shop next door, its barred windows glowing a sickly green. The world moved on, but Marcus was stuck, a broken cog in a machine that didn't care. The second passerby was Sarah Coleman, the young pastor from the first part, still clutching her tote bag as she emerged from the subway's glow. Her day at the church conference had been uplifting, talks of faith, community, and being the hands and feet of love. Her sermon notes, scribbled with verses about neighbors and mercy, weighed heavy in her bag. She'd almost made it past the alley when she saw him again, Marcus, slumped like a discarded rag doll. Her steps faltered, her sneakers scuffing the pavement. The cross around her neck felt heavier now, a silent rebuke. Sarah's heart thudded. She'd preached about the Good Samaritan just last Sunday, her voice ringing with conviction in her church's air-conditioned sanctuary. But this wasn't a parable, this was real. The alley was dark, its shadows thick with menace. Stories of muggings, scams, and worse flooded her mind. What if he's dangerous? She thought. What if this is a trap? She glanced at Marcus, his chest rising weakly, and felt a pang of guilt. She fumbled for her phone, thinking to call 911, but her fingers froze. What if the cops took too long? What if they didn't come at all? She'd heard stories of calls ignored in neighborhoods like this. Besides, she was late for a youth group meeting, and her car was just a block away. I'll call from there, she muttered, convincing herself it was enough. She hurried past, her prayer for Marcus's safety trailing behind like an afterthought. By the time she reached her car, the youth group's group chat was buzzing, and Marcus slipped from her mind. Minutes ticked by, each one heavier than the last. Marcus's world was shrinking, pain, cold, and the faint hum of the city were all that remained. A stray cat slunk past, its eyes glinting as it sniffed the air before darting away. The alley felt like a grave, and Marcus was sinking into it. Then came another set of footsteps, heavier, less hurried. Ryan Delgado, a middle-aged ER nurse, was walking home after a double shift at St. Mary's Hospital. His scrubs were wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot from 16 hours of stitching wounds and calming panicked families. Ryan knew these streets, he'd grown up a few blocks away, back when the neighborhood had more corner stores than payday loan shops. He was bone-tired, dreaming of a hot shower and the leftover pizza in his fridge. His phone pinged with a text from his ex, asking about child support, another weight on his shoulders. Ryan's gaze caught Marcus as he passed the alley's mouth. He stopped, his nurse's instincts kicking in. The guy looked bad, blood, shallow breathing, no movement. Ryan's training screamed at him to act, but his street smarts whispered caution. This wasn't the hospital, this was Carver Boulevard, where good deeds could get you hurt. He'd seen enough stab wounds to know this could be a setup. Check him, but be quick, he told himself. He took a step closer, peering into the shadows. "Hey, buddy, you alive?" he called, his voice gruff but steady. No response. Ryan's hand hovered over his phone, ready to call for help, but then he heard a car screech nearby, a reminder of the city's unpredictability. He had kids to think about, a daughter who needed him home. "Sorry, man," he muttered, stepping back. He dialed 911 as he walked away, giving a vague description of a guy down on Carver. The dispatcher promised to send someone, but Ryan knew someone could mean hours. He kept walking, his conscience stinging but his survival instinct stronger. Marcus's breath hitched, a faint plea escaping his lips. The city didn't hear it. The question lingered, in a world of strangers, who would stop? The city's pulse throbbed on, a relentless rhythm of noise and motion that drowned out the faint gasps of Marcus Tate. He lay broken in the alley off Carver Boulevard, his body a map of bruises and blood, his delivery bike a mangled relic beside him. The streetlight above flickered, casting jagged shadows over the graffiti-scarred walls and the dumpster that reeked of rot. Marcus's vision swam, his world reduced to pain and the cold bite of asphalt against his skin. The muggers who'd left him here were ghosts now, lost in the city's maze, taking his phone, wallet, and hope with them. The ancient question, "Who is my neighbor?" echoed in the silence, unanswered as the urban sprawl churned past. Carver Boulevard was a vein of the city's underbelly, where the glow of downtown skyscrapers felt like a taunt. The alley was a forgotten scar, ignored by the joggers, commuters, and late-night hustlers who passed by. Marcus's shallow breaths were a faint protest against the indifference, but the city didn't listen. A siren wailed in the distance, too far to matter. Time was slipping, and Marcus with it. The third passerby was a woman in her 40s, Carla Ruiz, a social worker with a caseload heavier than her worn-out sneakers. Her shift at the community center had ended an hour ago, but the weight of her clients' stories, evictions, overdoses, broken families, still clung to her. She was heading to the bus stop, her purse slung across her chest, when she spotted Marcus's crumpled form. Her steps slowed, her trained eye catching the signs of trouble, blood pooling, uneven breathing, the unnatural angle of his arm. She'd seen too many kids like him, chewed up by the city's edges. Carla's instinct was to help. She'd spent years advocating for people like Marcus, navigating bureaucracy to get them beds, meals, or a second chance. But the alley was dark, and her common sense screamed caution. She'd heard stories, Good Samaritan stabbed, robbed, or worse. Her teenage son was waiting at home, probably heating up leftovers and texting his friends. "I can't risk it," she thought, her heart twisting. She pulled out her phone, her fingers hovering over 911. But the last time she'd called for a client, the ambulance took 40 minutes, and the cops asked more questions than they answered. She glanced at Marcus, his face half hidden in shadow, and whispered, "Hang on, kid." She dialed 911, gave a quick description, young guy, beat up, Carver and 14th, and promised herself she'd follow up later. She didn't. The bus pulled up, its doors hissing open, and Carla climbed aboard, the alley fading behind her. Marcus's fingers twitched, scraping the pavement. A faint groan escaped his lips, too weak to carry. The city's hum swallowed it, car horns, a pulsing bassline from a passing car, the clatter of a skateboarder rolling by. The alley was a black hole, pulling Marcus deeper into its grip. Then came another figure, moving with the loose stride of someone who knew these streets too well. Jamal Carter was a rideshare driver, 32, with a daughter's school fees and a landlord breathing down his neck. His old Honda was parked a block away, its engine still ticking from a long shift. Jamal wasn't looking for trouble, he was looking for home, maybe a beer and a few hours of sleep before his next gig. His phone pinged with a fare request, but he ignored it, his eyes catching the glint of Marcus's bike in the alley. He stopped, squinting into the dark. "Yo, you good?" he called, his voice low, testing the waters. No answer. Jamal's gut tightened. He'd grown up around here, back when the neighborhood had more soul than strife. He knew alleys like this, places where the city hid its casualties. Marcus wasn't moving, and that stillness hit Jamal like a warning. He stepped closer, his sneakers crunching on broken glass. The streetlight showed blood, too much of it, staining Marcus's jacket and the ground beneath him. Jamal cursed under his breath. He wasn't a doctor, wasn't a cop, just a guy trying to make it. But leaving didn't feel right. He crouched beside Marcus, checking for a pulse. It was there, faint but real. "Hang in there, man," Jamal muttered, pulling out his phone. He dialed 911, his voice steady as he gave the dispatcher the details: "Guys hurt bad, alley off Carver, near the vape shop. Send help quick." The dispatcher's questions dragged on: name, age, description, and Jamal answered what he could, his eyes scanning the shadows for trouble. He wasn't naive, this wasn't the safest place to linger. But Marcus's shallow breaths kept him rooted. The ambulance was on its way, the dispatcher said, but Jamal knew on its way could mean anything in this city. He dragged Marcus gently to a less filthy patch of sidewalk, propping him against the wall. His own jacket, a faded denim he'd had since his daughter was born, went over Marcus's shoulders to keep him warm. Jamal stayed, waving off another fare notification. The city kept moving, but for now, Jamal didn't. The city's pulse beat on, a ceaseless rhythm of headlights and distant sirens, indifferent to the drama unfolding in the alley off Carver Boulevard. Marcus Tate lay slumped against the grimy wall, his breathing shallow, blood seeping through his torn jacket. The streetlight above cast a sickly glow over his bruised face, his delivery bike a twisted wreck nearby. The muggers who'd left him here were long gone, their theft of his phone, wallet, and dignity complete. The ancient question, "Who is my neighbor?" hung heavy in the damp air, as the city's endless churn seemed to answer with silence. The alley was a scar on the city's hide, ignored by the commuters and clubgoers who hurried past. Graffiti preached defiance on the walls, while the stench of rotting trash preached neglect. Marcus's faint groans were swallowed by the urban drone, car horns, a pulsing bassline from a nearby bar, the clatter of a late-night skateboarder. His world was shrinking to pain and cold, his hope fading with each ragged breath. Jamal Carter knelt beside him, his denim jacket draped over Marcus's trembling shoulders. Jamal was no hero, just a rideshare driver with a daughter to feed and bills piling up like unopened mail. His old Honda idled a block away, his shift technically over, but something about Marcus's stillness kept him rooted. He'd called 911 10 minutes ago, his voice steady as he'd told the dispatcher, "Guys hurt bad, alley off Carver, near the vape shop. Hurry up." The dispatcher promised help, but Jamal knew this city, help was never as fast as you needed it to be. He checked Marcus's pulse again, his fingers finding the faint thrum under clammy skin. "Come on, man, stay with me," Jamal muttered, his breath visible in the chilly air. He scanned the alley for threats, his street smarts on high alert. Places like this were traps waiting to spring, muggers, junkies, or worse could be lurking. But Marcus's shallow breaths, the way his hand twitched like he was reaching for something, hit Jamal hard. He'd seen too many kids like this, chewed up by the city and spit out in alleys just like this one. The wait stretched on, each minute heavier than the last. Jamal's phone buzzed with another fare request, but he swiped it away. His daughter, Aisha, was probably asleep by now, safe with his mom in their cramped apartment. He could almost hear his mom's voice, warning him not to get involved, to keep his head down and survive. But leaving Marcus wasn't an option, not yet. He adjusted the jacket over Marcus, noticing a cracked ID in his pocket, Marcus Tate, 28, address in the East End. Jamal tucked it back, his jaw tight. This guy was somebody's son, maybe somebody's brother. He wasn't just another statistic. A new figure approached the alley, her heels clicking sharply against the pavement. Elena Vasquez was a lawyer, her briefcase swinging as she hurried toward a late-night meeting with a client. Her navy blazer and crisp blouse marked her as out of place in this part of town, but her firm's pro bono work often brought her to the city's edges. She spotted Jamal crouched over Marcus and froze, her hand tightening on her briefcase. "Everything okay?" she called, her voice cautious, professional. Jamal looked up, sizing her up. "He's hurt." "Waiting on an ambulance," he said, his tone clipped but not hostile. Elena stepped closer, her eyes flicking between Marcus's bloodied form and Jamal's tense posture. She'd seen scenes like this in her work, victims of the city's violence, left to fend for themselves. Her instinct was to help, but her training screamed caution. "Don't get involved," her mentor's voice echoed. "You can't save everyone." She pulled out her phone, checking the time. Her client was waiting, and this wasn't her fight. "You called 911, she asked, already knowing the answer. Jamal nodded, his eyes back on Marcus. Elena hesitated, then opened her briefcase, pulling out a business card. "If he needs legal help, have him call me," she said, setting the card on the ground near Jamal. It felt like a hollow gesture, but it was something. She glanced at Marcus, her conscience prickling, then turned away. "Good luck," she said, her heels clicking faster as she left the alley behind. Jamal shook his head, muttering under his breath. Another do-gooder with no skin in the game. He checked his watch, 15 minutes since the 911 call. Marcus's breathing was weaker now, his lips pale. Jamal's frustration boiled over. "Where the hell's that ambulance?" he growled, dialing 911 again. The dispatcher's voice was calm, infuriatingly so. "Units are delayed. They're en route." Jamal hung up, his hands clenched. He wasn't leaving Marcus, not like the others. Finally, the distant wail of a siren cut through the city's hum. Help was coming, but would it be enough? The city's restless hum pulsed on, its neon veins glowing against the night sky, indifferent to the life hanging by a thread in the alley off Carver Boulevard. Marcus Tate lay propped against the grimy wall, his breaths shallow and uneven, blood soaking through his torn jacket and pooling on the asphalt. The streetlight above flickered, casting a harsh glow over his bruised face and the mangled remains of his delivery bike. The muggers who'd robbed him of his phone, wallet, and dignity were long gone, melted into the city's shadows. The ancient question, "Who is my neighbor?" lingered like a challenge, unanswered by the urban sprawl that churned past. The alley was a forgotten wound in the city's hide, its graffiti-scarred walls and reeking dumpster a testament to neglect. Marcus's faint groans were drowned by the city's soundtrack, honking horns, a pulsing bassline from a nearby club, the distant wail of sirens that never seemed to get closer. His world was pain, cold, and the fading hope that someone would care enough to stay. Jamal Carter crouched beside him, his denim jacket still draped over Marcus's trembling frame. Jamal was no saint, just a rideshare driver with a daughter to raise and a life stitched together by hustle. His Honda idled a block away, his shift long over, but Marcus's fragile breathing kept him anchored. He'd called 911 20 minutes ago, his voice sharp as he'd told the dispatcher, "Guys bleeding out, alley off Carver, near the vape shop. Get here now." The promise of help felt hollow in a city where ambulances could take hours, and Jamal's patience was fraying. He checked Marcus's pulse again, his fingers steady despite the knot in his gut. "Hold on, man," he said, his voice low but firm. Marcus's eyes fluttered, unfocused, his lips moving without sound. Jamal's mind raced, hospitals were a maze of bills and bureaucracy, and he had no idea who this guy was. But leaving him wasn't an option. He'd seen too many people like Marcus, discarded by a city that only cared about winners. Jamal's own life wasn't far from the edge, late rent, a car that needed repairs, a daughter who deserved better. Still, he stayed, his knees aching against the pavement. The alley wasn't empty anymore. A small crowd had gathered at its mouth, drawn by the flashing lights of an approaching ambulance. A teenage girl with neon green nails filmed the scene on her phone, narrating for her followers, "Yo, some dude got jumped, it's wild out here." A man in a hoodie muttered about another one and kept walking. The city watched, but it didn't act. Jamal ignored them, his focus on Marcus. The sirens grew louder, cutting through the night, and relief washed over him. Finally, the ambulance screeched to a stop, its red lights painting the alley in pulses. 2 paramedics jumped out, their gear clanking as they hurried over. "What happened?" one asked, kneeling beside Marcus. Jamal stood, his hands stiff with cold. "Got jumped. They took his stuff, left him like this. Been here maybe 30 minutes. The paramedic, a wiry guy with a buzz cut, checked Marcus's vitals, his movements quick but careful. "Pulse is weak, looks like internal bleeding. We need to move him." They loaded Marcus onto a stretcher, his body limp as they strapped him in. Jamal handed over the cracked ID he'd found in Marcus's pocket. "His name's Marcus Tate, lives in the East End," he said. The second paramedic, a woman with tired eyes, glanced at him. "You family?" Jamal shook his head. "Just the guy who stopped." She nodded, no judgment, and scribbled something on her clipboard. The stretcher rattled as they wheeled Marcus to the ambulance, the crowd parting like a reluctant tide. Jamal followed, his steps heavy. He didn't know why he was still here, his job was done, the professionals had taken over. But something pulled at him, a stubborn need to see this through. The ambulance doors were still open when the paramedic with the buzz cut turned to him. "We're taking him to St. Mary's. You coming?" Jamal hesitated, his phone buzzing with another fair request. Aisha's face flashed in his mind, her gap-toothed smile, her trust that he'd always come home. But Marcus's face, pale, broken, human, stayed with him too. "Yeah," Jamal said, climbing into his car to follow. The ambulance's siren wailed as it pulled away, carving a path through the city's chaos. The crowd dispersed, the girl with the green nails already posting her video with hashtags like #citylife and #staysafe. The alley emptied, its story already fading from the city's memory. But for Jamal, the question of who Marcus's neighbor was had an answer, and it wasn't letting go. The city's neon heart pulsed on, its skyscrapers and slums bathed in the restless glow of another night. At St. Mary's Hospital, the emergency room was a chaotic symphony of beeping monitors, hurried footsteps, and voices barking orders. Marcus Tate lay on a gurney, his bruised body now tethered to 4 lines and an oxygen mask. The blood that had stained the alley off Carver Boulevard was cleaned away, but the pain lingered, etched into his pale face. The muggers who'd left him broken were a fading memory, their crime just another statistic in a city that never slept. Yet the question, who is my neighbor? Found its answer in the man who hadn't walked away. Jamal Carter sat in the ER waiting room, his denim jacket gone, left behind in the ambulance with Marcus. His hands were clasped tightly, his eyes fixed on the linoleum floor, scuffed by countless anxious feet. He was a rideshare driver, not a hero, just a guy with a daughter, Aisha, waiting at home, and a life stretched thin by bills and hustle. Yet here he was, hours past his shift, following a stranger to a hospital he couldn't afford to be in. The ambulance ride had been a blur, the paramedics' questions sharp and urgent. Jamal had stayed, giving what little he knew, Marcus's name, his ID, the alley where it all went down. Now, he waited, unsure why but unable to leave. The ER was a cross-section of the city's soul, overworked nurses, weary families, a homeless man muttering in the corner. Jamal's phone buzzed with missed fare requests, each one a reminder of the money he wasn't making. His mom's voice echoed in his head, warning him to stay out of trouble, to keep his head down. But Marcus wasn't trouble, he was a person, and Jamal had seen too many people like him left behind. The city didn't care about guys like Marcus, or guys like Jamal, for that matter. It chewed them up, spit them out, and moved on. A doctor emerged, her scrubs wrinkled, her face tired but kind. "You with Marcus Tate?" she asked, spotting Jamal. He nodded, standing. "He's stable," she said. "Broken ribs, concussion, some internal bleeding, but we caught it in time. He's lucky you were there. Jamal shrugged, uneasy with the praise. Just did what I could. The doctor handed him a slip with Marcus's room number. He's awake, if you want to see him. No family's shown up yet. Jamal hesitated, his keys heavy in his pocket. He could leave now, go home to Aisha, forget this night. But he followed the doctor's directions, navigating the sterile halls to Marcus's room. Marcus lay propped up, his eyes half open, and IV dripping into his arm. He looked younger than 28, vulnerable in the hospital gown. Hey, Jamal said, lingering in the doorway. Marcus's gaze flickered toward him, confused but grateful. You, the guy from the alley? His voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. Yeah, Jamal said, stepping closer. How you holdin' up? Marcus managed a weak nod. Thanks, man. Didn't think anyone'd stop. Jamal waved it off, but the words hit deep. He'd stopped because he couldn't not stop, not after a lifetime of seeing the city turn its back on people like them. They talked briefly, stilted at first. Marcus was a delivery driver, scraping by like Jamal, living in a walk-up in the East End. He had a mom out of state, no insurance, and a hospital bill that'd probably crush him. Jamal didn't have answers, but he listened. When a nurse came to check Marcus's vitals, Jamal slipped her his number. If he needs anything, let me know. It was a reckless promise, but it felt right. Outside, the city hadn't changed. Carver Boulevard was still a battleground, its alleys hiding stories no one wanted to hear. The councilman, the pastor, the social worker, the lawyer, they'd all passed by, their reasons stacking up like excuses, too busy, too scared, too jaded. Jamal wasn't better than them, he was just the one who stayed. He'd lost a night's pay, maybe more, but he'd gained something heavier, a reminder that being a neighbor wasn't about convenience or safety. It was about seeing someone, really seeing them, when the world looked away. As Jamal drove home, the city's lights blurred past, a kaleidoscope of indifference and possibility. Marcus would recover, but the question lingered, in a city of millions, who would be a neighbor tomorrow? The answer, Jamal knew, started with one person willing to stop.